He is the strongest.
Are you the strongest because you're Jaxel MS? Or are you Jaxel MS because you're the strongest?
The Infinite Forbidden releases on July 19th. This set blows the roof off the power level of the game with multiple new engines and staples that change everything about the format. The possibilities are infinite, and there's no going back. Here's Fiend Smith Engraver is a level 6 Light Fiend that can pitch itself from hand to search a Fiend Smith spell or trap, can shuffle a Light Fiend from graveyard back into the deck to summon itself from grave, and can pop a Fiend Smith equipped card you control and a monster on the field. Tracked searches any Light Fiend, then discards a card, and can banish itself from grave to fusion summon a Fiend Smith. Sanct summons a Fiend Smith token and can reset itself when a Fiend Smith is destroyed, and Fiend Smith in Paradise wipes the field save for one level 7 or higher Light Fiend you control, and when your opponent special summons, you can banish it from grave to foolish or extra foolish a Fiend Smith. Requiem is a Link 1 that requires a Light Fiend, can quick effect tribute itself to summon a Fiend Smith from deck, and can equip itself from grave to a non-Link Light Fiend. Sequence is a Link 2 that requires a Light Fiend, can fusion summon a Fiend by shuffling back the materials from grave, and can equip itself from graveyard to a non-Link Light Fiend, giving it targeting protection. Lacrima is a fusion of 2 Light Fiends that docks your opponent's monsters by 6, either reborns or adds back a Light Fiend from grave or banished on summon, and when sent to the grave, shuffles back another Light Fiend from grave to deal 1200. And Fiend Smith Desiree is a fusion of Engraver and 2 other Light Fiends that can quick effect negate a number of face-up cards in the field up to the Link rating of Links equipped to it, and when he's sent to the grave, can shuffle back another Light Fiend to send a card on the field to the graveyard. Alright, we're going to do this segment in 3 stages. We're going to talk about how neat these cards are for existing Light Fiend decks, then we're going to discuss these cards in the context of the ever-expanding Fiend Link ecosphere, and then things are going to get real weird real quick. So let's enjoy talking about Fabled while it lasts. Almost goes without saying that Tracked is probably the best support card Fable has ever gotten, since it can search about half the cards in the deck and then immediately discard any card, even the one you just searched. So you can trigger things like Lurry, basically e-tellying a free body. But if a free body isn't what you need, there's also some pretty sick utility cards like Santa Claus, Archfiend Eccentric, or Curry Photon, which is seen play as a side deck card against Tenpai to make them unable to OTK. Also cool that the synergy with Light Fiend decks goes both ways, since any Light Fiend can become Requiem, who can summon an Engraver, and then make Sequence so that Lacrima can add Engraver back to hand to get the search for Tracked. From that point, you can summon back Engraver with his own effect, meaning you'll have 2 level 6 Fiends to make Wave King High Caesar, protecting the remainder of your combo from Niv and Bestials. Or you can make Beatrice, but we're still only on Chapter 1. You'll also have the materials in position at that point to use Tracked's Graveyard effect, "We salute you, masterpiece of card design, Ground Xeno," to summon Desiree, so you'll even have a way to negate an Imperm if that's what you need. What are the Light Fiend decks are there again? I guess Musket now has 2 Link 1s, and one of them even does something going first now. A searcher for Caspar that's also a good way to trigger Caspar is at least a little big for them. After shuffling through your Evil Twins, you can link one of them into Requiem to extend a little further beyond Trouble Sunny Pass. Here's a couple decks that randomly have Light Fiends, all of which can either be accessed by Tracked or can be made into Requiem to pivot in the opposite direction. One of the weirder ones that saw play in the OCG was a Cybers Fiend Smith deck that would play Draconet to summon White Duston, or could use 4 Mud Skipper, revealing Magical Musketeer Max, so you could make Max search Parallel Exceed, then link off Max into Requiem to trigger Exceed. Moving on to the most obvious home for them, the Yubel Unchained Sacred Beast Mega Conglomerate benefits greatly from having this 3 of extender that can span the field with fiends that isn't super dependent on your normal summon. With Engraver alone, you can search Track, summon Lurry, make Requiem to get the second copy of Engraver, and reborn the first copy so you can make Yama or Caesar early. If you're not afraid of Nib, you can go through Sequence there to do exactly the same thing, just have a free Link 2 on board. In terms of accessing the Fiendsmith engine without drawing Engraver, there does happen to be exactly one Nightmare Throne target that's light, meaning you have a searchable Requiem material, but he sucks so much ass I'm not going to waste any more of your time on him. So to find a light fiend, you'll want to look to the extra deck. Now, there's not too many generic light fiends in the extra, but there is a generic link too. Moon of the Closed Heaven just requires 2 effect monsters, so all it takes to get to Requiem is to put 2 bodies on board. That's not full combo into anything on its own though, since all it'll do is summon Engraver from deck, so you'll need a 3rd body to link off into sequence. Which means Dark Beckoning Beast is now even more valuable, since between himself, the extra normal of the 2nd copy you can search with Spirit Gates, and Spirit Gates Reborn, he makes 3 bodies on his own. And since you can use those 2 level 6s to make Beatrice and then link off into Muckraker, Beckoning Beast alone finally has a way to access your starters for your U-Bell combo. Remember when I said it was gonna get weird? Since any 3 monsters or a single copy of Engraver now gets you to Beatrice, Fiend Smith has essentially breached containment, especially after some players took notice of how you can follow up by linking Sequence and Beatrice into Promethean Princess, meaning you can mill Snake Eye Ash and then reborn it. And ladies and gentlemen, after 5 straight minutes of talking about these cards, I am excited to welcome you to the beginning of the segment about Fiend Smith. In the OCG, these cards have become a common engine in Snake Eye. In addition to just being more starters in hands that already have combo, you can use the Fiend Smith engine to bait Interruption by threatening to summon your Protect and Negates, including forms of Interruption the deck never even had access to, like Caesar and Desiree. Engraver's removal effect can assist in breaking a board going second, Lacrima can deal 1200 damage for no particular reason, and Desiree can be linked off either on your own turn or with IP after using his negate to trigger his effect to send an opponent's card. Speaking of send, the link monsters equipping themselves to Light Fiends for free makes them good sends for the effects of Ash, Oak, and Original. And if you want to make yourself really angry for no reason, turn off the League of Legends because I got your back on this one. Desiree can negate your own Promethean Princess after using her effect to break the Firelock and allow her to be made straight into an Apollo Usa. And if you thought Lacrima's burn effect was nothing but a fancy Game 3 win con, fuck you stupid piece of shit. One thing that started popping up in side decks is Angel of Blue Tears, which can banish itself from grave to set any normal trap from deck when burn damage is inflicted. No! Not again. Fuck off! Being able to detach Lacrima from Beatrice to send Blue Tears and immediately trigger it with the 1200 burn has made this a highly consistent option for finding floodgates like Dimensional Barrier and Black Goat. Hey, while we're on the subject of normal traps, let's talk briefly about Labyrinth. Not only does a consistent Beatrice line mean access to welcomes and rollbacks, and whatever you want to reset with Lovely, but a healthy infusion of light level 6s gives you the ability to make full power Chaos Angel. But don't worry, that interaction can't be used too generically. You need a Dark level 4 to use that. How many Dark level 4s could there be? But this, of course, is not even the smallest fragment of the tip of the iceberg here. This is not even the foreskin of the iceberg. With how generic Closed Heaven is and how lucrative and malleable the payoff can be, it's all but guaranteed this engine will keep popping up in as many places as there are Beatrice targets. That paragraph was 2 pages long. Oh my god. Let's do a fun one to cool off. Yeah, this Exodia shit should be easy. Millennium Ankh lets you show 5 Forbidden 1 monsters from wherever the hell you want, summon the unstoppable Exodia Incarnate from extra, then every monster card you control has to fuck off except this laundry list of Exodia's roommates that includes Sengenjin because we're still feeling the consequences of the What is an Archfiend article to this day, and then locks you from summoning for the rest of the turn, and then it goes back to the deck instead of the graveyard. These 3 all place themselves from the hand to the back row for free, and then can either pay 2,000 life points or reveal Millennium Ankh to summon themselves, and then search something. So to summarize, you can pay 2k to summon a really large object, or reveal a mill in hand just to live in the projects. Sengenjin summons itself, then searches another Millennium monster as protection from monster effects. Golem summons itself, then searches Wedju Temple and protects Ankh from being negated. And Shield summons itself, then searches the Ankh itself, and is protected from spell trap effects. Fiend, Reflection, and Maiden are illusions, that place themselves in the back row but only come out when your opponent activates a card or effect. Maiden protects your level 5 or higher illusion or spellcaster monsters from being targeted, and Reflection gains life points. Wedju Temple can place any monster from hand in the back row, then place a Millennium monster from deck in the back row as well, and if a Millennium is destroyed, you can crystallize it. The unstoppable Exodia Incarnate is a fusion of 5 Forbidden 1 monsters that can't be destroyed by card effects, gains attack equal to your life each time it battles, can negate a spell or trap once per turn, and during the end phase sets 1 Obliterate or Exod spell trap from deck. Also, you lose 1,000 during your standby phase. Obliterate Blaze bestows 2 effects to a level 10 or higher Exodia monster. Pay half your life to Calamity yourself, then Heavy Storm, then equip all 5 special cards from hand or deck, each giving him 2k. And Piercing, that's the other one, he also gets Piercing. And Exod Fires of Rage wipes your opponent's board if you control a level 10 or higher Exodia, and can banish itself from grave to search a Forbidden One, or shuffle up to 5 back into the deck. Honestly, not a bad start for a new strategy. Resolving Ankh gets you to a spell trap negate and either a board wipe or obliterates once per turn bounce, and that's just just by the end of turn 1. Unstoppable will keep setting your traps every end phase, and on turn 3 you're free to summon another Unstoppable to double the amount of spell negates and back row searches each turn. And resolving Ankh is easy enough, since Shield can search it, and Sengenjin, Golem, and Temple can all get you to Shield, meaning you can play up to 16 ways to incarnate. But that's kinda all the deck does, and all it can do, because Ankh punishes you for trying to end on anything else. Your 3 main dudes all summoning themselves for functionally free as long as you have enough rupees means you could easily make like an IP or something to back up your board, but it won't survive the Pharaoh's Curse, so no point even trying. Instead, your only other options for things to do on your opponent's turn are summon Maiden to get targeting protection, summon Reflection to try and get back the ridiculous amount of life you paid to build your board, or try to open a respectable amount of hand traps in a deck playing 5 special bricks. To me at least, it feels like this deck could use one more piece of support to really be respectable as a standalone strategy, and the absolutely massive restriction kills any chance of it being played as more of an engine. Right? Except actually what has happened is that some format warping jackwagons looking for a way to summon 3 effect monsters found that if you summon Sengenjin and search Golem, summon Golem and search Temple, then use Temple to summon the Shield, you can put 3 bodies on board with just 1 copy of Sengenjin, a monster from hand to sacrifice to Temple, and the lion's share of your health bar all before the fucking normal summon. In the OCG, this also mattered for Curious because they're all Earths with different types, but who cares about that old band fuck when you could just do Fiend Smith combo. Even if you're not in need of Requiem right now specifically, they're just remarkably free extenders. Both Temple and the random Stooge has to stick in the back row or face-up cards in the field, so you can sack them for your Snake Eye effects. Golem's even a level 6, so he can contribute to your Beatrice lines. Seeing it become this comically easy to summon 3 bodies for free without locking yourself or playing a shitty number of bricks can only make me think of one thing. Why couldn't they be level 4, huh? Ugh. That was supposed to be the fucking break! Jesus Christ. Give me a real shitter this time. Let's do fucking Gimmick Puppets. Gimmick Puppet Little Soldiers mills a Gimmick Puppet for cost on summon to copy its level, and can banish itself from grave to raise the levels of up to 2 puppets you control by 4. Rouge Doll can reveal a puppet exceeds from extra to summon herself and a puppet from deck with a level equal to that monster's rank, and if she's sent to the graveyard you can add her back to hand, but both effects lock you from the extra except Gimmick Puppets for the turn. Cattle Scream summons itself from hand or graveyard by detaching a material from an Xyz you control, and if it's attached to a Gimmick Puppet Xyz, grants it the ability to summon a monster from your opponent's grave to their field.
What about this?
Fantasix Machinix can detach a material to search rank up magic and give you an extra normal of a machine this turn, and if you summon a Gimmick Puppet Xyz, can summon itself from the graveyard to either field and add a rank up magic back to hand. And CXYZ. God damn, when was the last time we got a CXYZ? Must have been like while Zexal was airing. CXYZ's Gimmick Puppet Fanatics Machinix searches a puppet trap on summon, can detach a material to summon a monster from either graveyard to your opponent's field.
On this?
And if a monster is summoned to your opponent's field, you can pop it and burn them equal to half its original attack. Mansion of the Dreadful Dolls adds a Gimmick Puppet monster on activation, makes your Gimmick Puppets unable to die by battle and unaffected by monster effects except Xyz monsters, and can detach a material from one of your Xyz monsters to summon a Gimmick Puppet from your graveyard to your opponent's field.
What about
Finally, Service Puppet Play can steal monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Gimmick Puppet Xyz you control, and can banish itself from graveyard while you control a Gimmick Puppet Xyz to summon an Xyz monster from either graveyard to either field.
on this?
Alright, so first things first, despite like 5 effects that summon to your opponent's field, not a single card here has the capacity to give your opponent Nightmare on their turn. I mean, I guess you can do it on your own turn to blank shit like Nibiru and Bystials, but you're already protected from Nib if you draw the field spell and they can just chain the Bystial. But anyway, rather than the Floodgate Stun and Identity many have come to associate Gimmick Puppet with thanks to Branded, this version of Gimmick Puppet plans to win in a much more fair and interesting way. FTKing. Between Fanatics, Darkstrings, Giant Grinder, and Giant Hunter, there's enough ways to inflict massive damage to your opponent as long as you can force them to control enough big monsters. And between the Field Spell and Fanatics, you can make your opponent control the obnoxiously large Darkstrings enough time to burn them based on its stats at least twice. With Darkstrings popping your own Fanatics and Grinder and Fanatics popping Darkstrings twice, you can do a combined total of a shockingly convenient 8,050 damage. And getting to that point isn't too difficult, with the Field Spell doing it as a 1-card combo. A lot of that is thanks to Rouge Doll on Martha for anything in the archetype that can be searched by proxy with any of your foolish burial effects like Scissor Arms, Condolence Puppet, and Little Soldiers, and Little Soldiers being a normal summon that can mill any of your level 8s for cost, and in doing so become a valid material for your rank 8s means he's not only a way to get to Rouge Doll and therefore a 2nd and 3rd level 8 on board, but also to extenders like Dreary Doll and Cattle Scream if you've got Rouge in hand already. Fantasix is a fantastic combo piece getting you to Argent Chaos Force and recurring it an additional time so you can run through it thrice over the course of your turn. Giving you an extra normal and reborning itself gives you even more field swarming potential, and being being able to give it to your opponent instead gives you one more way to force them to control a monster, though its stats won't give you much damage. In terms of protecting your combo, Bisque Doll can give you targeting protection, and Cringe-ass Nene Baby will make all your monster effects unrespondable, but the biggest barrier to your opponent disrupting you is of course the field spell, which takes notes from Tenpai by just making your whole board towers on top of being a one-card full combo. The good news is the deck is still extremely interruptible. I guess I should be saying bad news, but fuck you, I'll shift around perspectives as much as I want. Rouge Doll's effect in hand is Prime Ashbait. There's plenty of space for Bystials and Crow to fuck you up. Imperm still works just fine under the field spell. Even Nibiru can clear out the puppets your opponent gives you so their burn effects fizzle. So yeah, a lot can go wrong, but there are still a few things you can do if your FTK fails. Getting to Fanatics lets you end on both a pop and a multi-steal, so it's not as though you're just passing on nothing. Since Darkstring's effect is mandatory on special summon, giving it to your opponent just once turns on Talons and Thrust so you can hand rip, try to draw more hand traps, or grab something like a side-decked barrier to survive to turn 3. Also, since Fantasix can search any rank-up magic, another option is to search Launch so that on your opponent's turn after you no longer need Fanatics, you can turn it into Varudras. There's also of course the Horus engine, a bunch of rank 8 enablers that can assist you in making your Volcasaurus wannabes for the FTK, or can give you the extension necessary to make other rank 8s that Rouge Doll normally locks you out of, like Photon Lord. The other great part of Horus is that it gives you a couple extra ways to find Mansion. The free draw from Imseti helps, and the option to play Wall makes set rotation viable, getting you Dira protection and turning off Imperm, the last hand trap that can hit your monsters on field. Oh, also if you use Little Soldiers on 2 level 8 puppets, you can hard make Zeus.
I give up!
Dark Magician, the Dark Magician of Black Magical Dark Magicianness, is treated as Dark Magician on field, summons himself if you control Shining Sark, and when he's destroyed while a high-level monster is on the field, he can come back and set a Dark Magician reference from deck. Dark Magic Mirror Force took about 30 seconds for me to read, and unfortunately due to the laws that govern the linear passage of time, I will never be getting those 30 seconds back. This card's actually kind of neat for Shining Sark, giving them an extra little thing you can do on top of their existing lines. By using Gandora turn 1 to pop Magician and get silent, you can trigger it to come back from Banished and set either Destined Rivals for a wide Imperm, or Secrets of Dark Magic so you can fuse Magician and Gandora on your opponent's turn into Dragoon. That's cool and all, but doesn't honestly change much about how the deck functions on a basic level because your 1-card combos don't have the search power to get to both Gandora and Magician. I think 2-card combos get a bad rap for the most part, especially in a deck like this where it's not draw these 2 specific cards, but more like draw pretty much any 2 cards from the deck you're playing. It's really strange this deck seems to be progressing at a pace of 1 interruption per card. Your 1-card combos end on 1 negate, 2-card combo is 2 negates. You're gonna lose your shit when I tell you what the 3-card combos do. I don't know what they're doing here, because this is just not modern deck design. Drytron U2 can summon itself from the hand or graveyard if you control a Drytron card, and searches a Drytron monster on summon, but both effects lock you to only ritual summoning machines this turn. Drytron Meteonis D.A. Draco Nids protects your other Drytrons from card effects, can negate a monster effect twice per turn by banishing Drytron monsters from your grave with equal or greater attack, and when your opponent destroys it, it floats into a ritual monster with 4,000 attack. And Meteoroa Drytron is a continuous trap that can add back 2 banished Drytrons when one gets banished by tributing 1 from field, and can reveal Meteonis in hand to ritual summon a machine, Memphis Dryrub style. These cards move Drytron in a new direction, as New 2 gives you a spectacular consistency boost, but at a steep cost. Since it summons itself without a tribute and then goes +1, it's a lot more resource efficient than most Drytrons. Because it can come back from the graveyard, it makes a great tribute for your Drytrons, and being able to search any Drytron makes it much easier to access the God combo, Alpha Zeta, without burning your Mu Beta Mill. It also gives you another way to find Ursatron, your only means of searching Drytron back row, meaning you'll have much more consistent access to Fafnir and Nova. And of course, because Nova can summon Mewtwo, who can then search Alpha, the deck finally has some 1-card lines instead of always needing a name and something to tribute. So there's numerous upsides to Mewtwo, but so too is there a downside, as it locks you out of ritual summoning most of the usual suspects of Drytron's end board, and instead incentivizes you to play Drytron's own rituals that comprise a majority of the machine rituals in the game. For what it's worth, Batos Buster is a machine too, so you're not losing access to that engine for an easy spell trap negate, and of course the Drytron rituals are quite strong build-arounds. Sure, DA Draconids takes 3 Drytrons to equal the record-breaking attack stat for his ritual summon, but the payoff is a soft twice per turn Crystal Wing, and if he's ever killed, he can float into an old Draconids who can ding 2 cards. With Meteoroa up, you can even exploit that soft twice per turn by tributing off DA to add back 2 of the names you banished with him, then revealing Meteonis in hand to tribute those 2 and a secret third thing to bring back DA and use him again. What's more, this newfound desire to end on machine rituals more often makes Mu Beta's spell trap negate a more important piece of disruption. And on top of all that, it's not like your extra deck locked in any way. and summon whatever the fuck you want out of there. I'd say maybe the one thing you really miss out on is being able to summon Ben 10 to get one more activation out of her, or make Beatrice, and I guess it's hard to give up a win con that skips to the punch so hard as Black Chaos Max. So is this new win con necessarily better than the existing one that misses out on the consistency of Mewtwo? I don't know. So is this new win con necessarily better than the existing one that misses out on the consistency of Mewtwo? I think so. It's not like big stupid floodgates are out of the question, since you could still save the normal for Vanity's ruler, and you obviously still play Ben 10 and maybe even still summon it every now and then in weird looking hands that don't include Mewtwo. Tenpai Dragon Genroku summons itself as a tuner when it's added to hand, then can gain a level, and as a quick effect contribute itself to summon another Tenpai from deck, but lock you to dragons. Dora searches a level 4 or lower fire dragon on normal, and can check the top card for a fire dragon, and gain 1000 for each Dora you control if you hit.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it!
And Sangen Kaiho is a trap you can activate if you can only control fire dragons and your opponent controls more monsters than you. To make it
end of main.
And if 3 or more attacks have been declared this turn, you can banish it from grave to draw a card, then barf all the Tenpais out of your hand. Dora and Genroku are good consistency boosters for Tenpai, both giving you yet still more ways to get to Pydra and Chundra. Genroku can be searched with Summon in Kaimen and Dora, and then tag into Pydra or straight into Chundra to get your OTK going. You can even use Magnamut to get to it as early as your opponent's end phase, and tag into Pydra to get an early search. Dora has exactly the same search targets as Kaimen, and nothing out of the ordinary really stood out there, so he's really just another normal summon that does full combo. Not even an interesting level or anything, just another non-tuner 3. Genroku, on the other hand, can be a tuner 3, and thus opens up potential to make 6s like Malong, and maybe even 9s like Trishula. It's also worth noting that since it can tag out on declaration of its own attack, it can artificially inflate the attack count on the turn if you really need it. Seeing how the number to hit on all your cards that care is 3, I don't know if it's really going to be the difference maker. Jumping over to Kaiho, it's really strange. Seems like an attempt to force more of a direct going first plan on Tenpai by giving them a way to force your opponent to go to the battle phase where they can work their magic. By normaling Pydra, you can set Kaiho from deck, and as soon as your opponent controls 2 monsters, you can force them into battle, and then they just go straight to main phase 2. So to actually do anything cool, you need to have an additional Kaimen or summoning or something, so you can attempt to get at least 2 Tenpais on board during your opponent's battle phase to start doing some synchro plays. And you can, of course, still convert those 2 into seals for the bounce, since it'll flow into Fadra. When that happens, if your opponent still has 2 bodies on board, you can chain Kaiho to Fadra to end the main phase before you control too many monsters to activate it. Or if you use Fadra on Genroku, you can hold Kaiho and use the window after Genroku tributes itself to use Kaiho. The payoff from that point is either Black Rose to make everything your opponent has put on board so far fuck off, or by going through Biden Dragon, you can make Transcendent, which will kill all your opponent's monsters with less attack than it in battle. If your opponent has 3 monsters with less than 300 attack, that's lights out, so the dream of OTK in your opponent's turn is kind of possible, but more realistically, this is just a fancy Raigeki. The strongest application, of course, is if your opponent does not have another main phase to fall back on. Against Runic, this card is like 15 9/11s. If your opponent thought they were safe forcing out seals by normal summoning and going to battle, they're in for a rude awakening when they try to combo off in main phase 2. Kinda hard to say where this fits in Tenpai right now. Probably not worth maining because it's almost always useless game 1, and probably not even the best searchable one of to side in for going first. The graveyard effect is probably a Mahjong reference or something.
I don't really care.
Madolche Dessert bounces 2 monsters, including a Madolche you control, then summons a Madolche from hand or extra with attack less than or equal to the combined attack of the targets. And if a Madolche card returns from the grave to the deck, you can attach Dessert from grave to an Xyz monster you control. Madolche Mini Meowkaroons is a Link 3 beast that searches any Madolche card on summon, and can target a monster in graveyard to shuffle into the deck to summon a Madolche monster from hand, but lock you to Madolche effects for the turn. Madolche Queen Tiara Frez can rank up on top of Tiramisu, and it's just... I'm sorry, I can't. It's Tiramisu as a quick effect. Oh my lord. Patch notes. Tiramisu is now a quick effect. I haven't stopped laughing about this since the first time I read the card. Oh my god. Good news if you're taking a vacation to Italy. You can now activate Tiramisu even if your train leaves in 20 minutes. Okay, I'm back in character now. I'm locked in. So it's not just Tiramisu as a quick... It's opponent's turn only, so you can't just use Tiramisu then rank it up to clear twice as much of your opponent's board. But it's nothing short of incredible that Konami recognized that the non-targeting double shuffle that's aged like fine wine into modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Could only rock any harder if it was an interruption. As a whole, this support kind of streamlines a lot of the key points of Madolche's setups and gives them a bit more of a ceiling to work towards. Meowcarun can get you any Madolche from deck and immediately summon it with its second effect, including Messengelato, who will trigger because Meowcarun is a beast. Which also means that drawing Messengelato isn't quite as bad anymore. You can also search Mageline to make use of the extra normal from Salon, and then search Messengelato with her, so you'll get to search one of the traps, except actually I tricked you, it's 2 of the traps because Salon triggers there too, and then make a rank 4. Now Tiara and Glass Souffle are good options for that, but of course the only Madolche that locks you to Madolches is petting, so if you can get to Meowcarun, who only effect locks you without going through her, you still have generic options like Baguska. In the OCG, this has breathed new life into Madolche's old partnership with MX Saber Invoker, since all it takes is Invoker and an extra body to make Meow. The big thing Meow's material line means for us in the States is that Vernisylves can be a bit more helpful in building the board, since there's finally a Madolche extra deck monster that they can be used as material for. Misting Seedlings can even set up the full end board on its own with just a monster to discard. Not bad for old Quack Silverman, and Dessert is a cool new option to use alongside Promenade that's not only a quick bounce, but also provided you target 2 monsters with at least some attack, can drop Glass Souffle on the board, and then immediately get to trigger its effect since it hits the board just in time to see Dessert go to the grave, giving you a grave disruption and or decent follow-up. Thanks to Madolche's downright silly number of cards that summon from deck, the deck has quite a few 1-card combos to at the very least end on Tiara and a trap. Can't wait for the next patch when they forcibly make Chicklets playable. Dark End Evaporation Dragon and Light End Sublimation Dragon can summon themselves by banishing a level 8 dragon from extra but lock you to dragons, and on field they're poly. They also each do a slightly nerfed version of the original End Dragon effects, but Dark End can't do it on the same turn that he fuses. Okay. Night Arm Dragon summons itself when you summon a high-level dragon and can make its level and attribute the same as one of your banished dragons, and when sent to the graveyard, it can give a dragon you control 1,000 attack at spell speed 4. Alright, sure. Dragon's Light and Darkness either shuffles back a level 8 dragon to search one with a different attribute, gives a dragon you control 200 times its level, or negates an effect that targets a dragon you control. And Light and Darkness Dragon Lord sends shivers down your spine is a fusion of a level 8 Light and Dark dragon, is treated as both light and dark on the field, once per chain mandatorily cuts its attack by 1,000 to negate a card, and when your opponent destroys it, you can reborn a dragon. I've been studying card design for around 2 years now. I've seen some of the strangest shit you could believe get printed, and found that it makes a lot more sense once you get the full picture of what Konami was going for. With all that being said, what the hell are these? This isn't a deck. Not an engine either, I don't think. Try something for me real quick. Open EDO Pro and try to type in any string of text that even vaguely narrows it down to these 5 cards. There isn't one. And yet somehow the design of these cards is also horrendously unimaginative. These two are the same card. I just can't even imagine why you'd ever play both instead of, I don't know, playing one of them in a deck that has a good level 8 dragon of the opposite attribute. This thing's function seems to be so you can swap between them, but fucking why? It's the same case. Do the same thing. Night Armed is meant to split the difference so you can draw either End Dragon and still make Lord, but he's not searchable, not even by this also unsearchable card. You can summon it with Armed Dragon Flash, but what the fuck am I even talking about? Oh, also his effect to give Lord an extra negate is spell speed 4, because if it wasn't, Lord would just negate it, because it's still mandatory. Let's talk about Lord for a second. This is Lad, but worse. It's got 3 negates instead of 5. The upside then, I guess, is that you can actually summon it, because it's in the extra deck instead of needing to be tribute summoned, but I mean, I don't know what to say. I just feel like I expect a little more thought put into modern card design than side grading off a 17-year-old card. It works exactly the same, feels exactly the same to play with. The only thing new is that you can summon it without being Tim himself. Except actually you can't summon it because fusion monsters are bad. The only deck that's really trying it out is Branded, who can fuse like Albion and Lubellion, but not with either of their own effects because they can only summon level 8 or lower fusion monsters. Dark End is being used as a Dragon Link extender. Every day until I die. Cosmo Queen, the Queen of Prayers, can summon itself when a field spell is activated and can either pop a field spell you control or negate a field spell your opponent controls to search a field spell.
Stop printing AFT! I am tired of seeing it! Oh my fucking god. Every 2 months they have to be like, oh, this card gets searched. Dragon Ravine, Necro Valley, something, ABC. Just shut up! Just shut up already! Fuck!
Ragnaraika Wicked Butterfly can pitch itself to summon a Rip from hand, and if it's banished from the hand or grave, you can draw a card during the end phase for each of the Rip types you control. Ragnaraika's Selene Snapper can banish up to 2 monsters from grave to pop the same number of opponent's back row, and can bottom a Rip you control to summon itself from grave. Not exactly what Ragnaraika needed. Butterfly is kind of the weakest extender of the bunch, but the Super Rejuvenation effect is kind of a cool payoff for playing a deck that'll let you summon the full squad. To trigger it, you have Mantis Monk's effect for an easy turn 1 banish. Selene Snapper can do that too, but he's kind of weird. In archetype back row removal is cool, but like, that's all he does. Feels kind of hard justifying a slot for ignition speed back row removal that you need to already be able to make a link 3 to get to. Ragnaraka's in a weird spot where it just doesn't feel like their fault that they're bad. It's just that every deck that needs them is too bad for them to fix the problem. The only place they've seen any success so far is in Plant Link, and that deck certainly is not playing either of these cards. Meanwhile, any deck that might isn't suddenly topping YCSs with them. Memento Sleepy can quick effect summon itself if one of your monsters has been destroyed this turn. Fusion summons a Memento on summon, and when it's destroyed can mill a Memento card. Memento Mictlan Tekutlika Creation King is an illusion fusion of 3 Mementos that can mill 3 Memento cards on summon, can quick effect pop an equal number of Mementos you control and cards your opponent controls, and can banish itself from grave to search the field spell. These cards massively improve Memento's consistency, and more importantly, their resilience to interruption. Sleepy gives you a second way to fusion summon that still works on both players' turns, giving you more ways to make Twin Dragon, and letting you conserve the Miracle Contact effective fusion for the more expensive Creation King. Being a level 3 means you can mill it with Tatsu alongside your 2 level 1s, a slot that would normally be filled with just an extra Anguish, or you can mill it with Gaddock to immediately get it to hand. And of course, having a float effect when it's destroyed, something weirdly uncommon amongst this group, means you get even more value than usual off your popping effects. But if you want to talk about milling, Creation King is on another level. Milling 3 cards on summon lets you set up multiple steps of your combo all at once. Getting Creation in grave, setting up names you haven't used yet to Reborn, loading your traps in the grave for the field to reset, cycling through Gaddock, or even milling another copy of itself so you can search the field spell. A direct line to Mictlan also frees up some of your other searches like Fusion to instead grab Cranium Burst or Bone Party. It goes without saying that the wide DPE is an incredible new piece of interruption that also helps break boards going second, but that shouldn't make you feel as though you can't link it off or pop it somewhere during your combo, because there's multiple ways to bring it back from the grave on your opponent's turn or make another one. Popping it while you have Mictlan up will give you the widest range of things to Reborn with the field, so that's often the optimal line of play rather than leaving it on board. This all adds a lot of malleability to your 1-card combos, letting you end on bigger boards uninterrupted while still having a decent floor to fall back on. There's also some stuff you can do with the Chimera fusions, since you have a couple beasts, a couple fiends, and even an illusion now. And of course, because it's a deck that includes monster cards, you can add Fiend Smiths. Valmonica Creation is a continuous trap that gives your Valmonica links 1200 while there's 6 or more resonance counters on your field, can link summon a Valmonica when your opponent special summons, and when it's sent from the hand or field to the graveyard, can place resonance counters on a scale until it has 3. And Verar Valmonican Concord is a link 2 that needs to use a Valmonica link, is unaffected by non-Valmonica cards while there are 6 or more resonance counters on your field, can attack an additional time for each level 4 Valmonica monster you control, and can negate a summon by removing 3 resonance counters. This feels a bit like not what Valmonica needed. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty cool. A towers that can negate the summon of whatever is going to threaten it is a good payoff, a good place to put a summon negate if nothing else. And even though to summon it, you have to either somehow make Duralame turn 1 or link off your Zebufera, which can only be summoned once per turn. If you get end on Creation, you can leave up Zebufera, use its effect for interruption, then quick link it off. And Creation also helps you trigger the field spell by instantly setting one of your scales to 3 counters. This means going second, you can leave the field, search a pen, then use it, pitching Creation to set scales, put 3 counters on Angelo, trigger the field to take an opponent's monster, and immediately link it off for Duralame to pop 3. During your opponent's turn, you can trigger it with things like Droplet or Super Poly, but in Archetype, you can use Follow Rhythm's Dust Tornado effect that in a lot of matchups would just go to waste when you want to bounce a monster. Now you can essentially convert that into a second monster interaction by triggering your Steal effect. The reason I say that this isn't what they needed is because the problem with the deck remains that there aren't 1-card combos, even with the deck's heavy synergy with Fiend Smith being probably one of the more relevant decks to have an in-archetype light Fiend. All your lines still need a way to Scales and a way to Celta. Many cards can do either, but there's still not really anything that can do both. Centurion Atri is a level 4 Dark Tuner that can pop out of the back row, be used as a non-tuner for a synchro summon, and on summon if you have a Centurion card and an Emblema card in grave, can draw a card. Emblema Salvation can banish a Centurion monster from your back row and a card your opponent controls, and it waking the dragons into placing 2 Centurions in your back row from anywhere. Odd. Oh yeah, just odd. Because of Atri, Emblema is now an archetype, but not in like a cool way, more in like a liability kind of way. Salvation is quick play removal, so it's good going first and second, but still isn't searchable, so it kind of feels like they just wanted to print a second Emblema so that Atri doesn't look so much like a crapshoot. Atri's alright. If you open Oath in addition to another starter, you can like fire it to get to Atri, who will then be live to draw a card since Oath is in the grave, but even if you're not getting that draw, it's still nice having a second tuner. Primera's restriction makes it kind of difficult to synchro summon more than once in a turn, so one more way to synchro summon using your existing engine pieces is nice. Better than playing fucking Agnimal Candle or something. Most importantly though, since Atri is a dark tuner, you can sync it with something like a Bestial to make Return Zero, baby. 1 trillion years Return Zero. I'm about to return your life points to 0, you stupid son of a bitch.
I'll fucking kill you!
Spell card Monster Reborn is a football team in Washington that can summon a monster from either graveyard, but it can't attack or activate its effects this turn. What this card gives up in utility compared to the original Monster Reborn, it makes up for in many other key ways. Making the monster unable to attack or use its effects means it's more of a straight extender than a potential snowball for rebuilding turn 3. Monster Reborn on Sprite Blue is functionally just starter but better, while Spell card Monster Reborn is just another free 2. I guess on things like Prank Kids and Genus Loci, the restriction's irrelevant, and it's only prohibited from using its effects for the turn, so let's say you have something you can use on the opponent's turn engraved, like a Crimson Dragon that got drive by Nibiru'd, you can bring it back so it can tag out next turn. Or you can steal a similar thing from your opponent's graveyard like a Ghost Ogre. But being a quick play adds quite a few possibilities. Being able to save your stuff from getting called by is nice, and getting to steal stuff your opponent is trying to reborn makes it work as a disruption you can even set to use on your opponent's turn. In a lot of ways, this makes it sort of in conversation with Called By and DD Crow, having some capacity to do what they do, failing to in other ways, and surpassing them in its own way. It's much worse going second than Crow, and can't accomplish most of Called By's primary functions, but what makes it unique is that it performs some of the non-engine functions of these cards, while also being a pretty good extender. So for combo decks that want as much gas as possible, a card like this can walk the line between the two worlds quite well. But obviously, it'll depend on the format and what exactly it is you need to be preparing for. Heretical Phobos is a generic rank 4 illusion that does the illusion thing and can negate a monster your opponent controls, then if it battled this turn, can take control of it. And if it has an illusion attached, that's a quick effect.
Neat!
So for starters, an illusion Xyz monster just seems so obvious. Why didn't I think of that? The illusion gimmick fits right into the Xyz monster gimmick of being able to threaten anything and everything if they can survive a battle phase. Being able to negate and maybe even steal something along the way is a neat added benefit that can really help in breaking a board. What's more interesting though is that this is a new payoff for illusion decks that isn't tied to Chimera in some way. Since it can be used as a quick negate as long as you get an illusion attached, it can be stuck on an end board as both an imperm and sort of a way to deter your opponent from trying to use the battle phase, since anything that battles becomes snatchable. The problem of course right now is that level 4 illusions are a bit limited. There's 2 that are tied to the Chimera archetype, which doesn't frequently get to make non-fusions. 2 of them are millennials, and specifically they're the 2 that don't summon themselves on demand, in addition to that deck wiping your own board to bring out its own boss. So no joke, the actual best material in existence for this card is Jongler Ghoul Illusionist, a normal monster with smoke too tough, swag too different, and bitch too bad. Necroquip Princess is a level 6 Fiend fusion of a monster equipped with a monster and a Fiend monster card that summons itself by sending the materials from hand or field. And when a monster is sent from the hand to grave to activate a card or effect, can either draw a card or equip that monster to itself. Aerial Eater is a level 6 Fiend fusion of 2 Fiends with the same attribute that mills a Fiend on summon and can banish 2 level 6 or higher Fiends with the same attribute to reborn itself. I did not think this was possible, but these TCG World Premieres make Fiend Smith even stronger on release than we could have ever anticipated. First of all, Necroquip's material line is tailor-made to accommodate Requiem, who can equip itself to the engraver it just summoned to satisfy the first material, while also still being a Fiend monster card and therefore a valid option for the second material. So just resolving Requiem will let you tag in a Necroquip, from which point you can use Engraver's effect to shuffle back Requiem and summon itself to make Caesar, Beatrice, or Sequence. This won't leave you with enough light Fiends engraved to profitably summon Lacrima though, so one option to still make the line work from there is to make Necroquip an Engraver into Ptolemy M7, letting you detach and add back Engraver, search Tract, and use Lurian Ptolemy to make Sequence. Alternatively, you can just use Sequence to make Aerial Eater instead of Lacrima, circumventing the rank 6 play and going straight into milling your starter. You can of course still use your light Fiends for it, or you can fuse your 2 Dark Fiend Sacred Beasts that Yubel commonly uses to make Moon. From there you can mill Spirit and reborn it with Muckraker, or since you don't need to use Opening to get that third body anymore, you can just use that to revive Spirit and not even Fiend lock yourself. And after linking off Aerial Eater, unlike Beatrice whose function starts and ends with milling, you can bring him back later in the turn either by banishing Engraver and Lacrima, or Necroquip and a Yubel. This will make it a lot easier to fit Caesar into your endboard plan, since there will be a much more flexible level 6 Fiend resource in your graveyard to make use of at any time. I am truly taken aback at how much these cards change the math on what's possible with the most important cards in this set, and more importantly how little time we have left to even scratch the surface on their usefulness before we have to play the most important event of the year this fucking weekend. Where Konami seemed to be trying to accommodate this exact issue by revealing Closed Heaven and early promotional material and confirming there wouldn't be a new ban list before the event, they've taken such a major step back by introducing 2 completely unpredictable elements to the engine at the very last minute. You can make the argument that maybe the extra decks of Snake Eye and and Yubel are too tight to accommodate these new options, but it sure would be nice if we had enough time to test that hypothesis before making a decision. Mimighoul Master is a level 4 zombie with destruction protection while you control a ghoul or your opponent controls a set monster, searches a Mimighoul monster on summon, and during your opponent's main phase can flip one of their set monsters face up. Archfiend, Dragon, and Cerberus can summon themselves to the opponent's field face down. Archfiend makes its controller pitch a card and their opponent draw a card on flip, then swaps control, and when it's normal or special, it flips a set monster face up. Dragon destroys all monsters you control, then swaps control on flip, and searches a Mimighoul back row on summon. Cerberus makes you banish the top 3 and give your opponent one of your banished monsters on flip, and then swaps control, and gives your spells targeting protection. Mimighoul Maker reveals 2 flip monsters from deck, randomly sets one to your opponent's field, and adds the other to your hand, then lets you summon a Mimighoul from hand. And when your opponent special summons, you can banish it from grave to flip one of their set monsters face up. Mimighoul Dungeon is a field spell that searches a Mimighoul once per turn, boosts all your Mimighouls that weren't summoned this turn by their own defense, and makes any player that controls a set monster unable to normal summon or attack with special summon monsters. And Mimighoul Room summons a ghoulie from hand or deck to your field, or set to your opponent's field, then can flip an opponent's monster face down, and can banish itself from graveyard to bounce any number of Mimighouls you control. This is a cool new idea for a deck, giving your opponent your flips that you can force up with Archfiend on your own turn, and Master or Maker on your opponent's. Archfiend is a cool advantage swing, while Dragon can be a great disruption or board breaker. Master, Dragon, and Dungeon form a pretty strong search loop, and Room is a good disruption outside of the deck's gimmick. And you're kinda gonna need it because it's kinda annoying how your opponent can out the cool trap you've laid for them by just flipping up Dragon before putting any other monsters on board. Room not only is a Book of Moon, but also can give them a Dragon whose battle position can't be changed this turn, so its flip effect is entirely at your discretion. Maker being generic to flips is interesting since it can give your opponent things like Hero Shadow Scout, but it's a little difficult to justify playing a bricky non-archetypal flip monster that you only have a coin flip's chance of successfully putting on your opponent's board. The same is then true of trying to search a flip monster you want to set to your own field, because then you might just accidentally give that to your opponent. One of the earliest thoughts I've heard pop up on how to use these cards is with Vernisylph, since they're all Earth. While there's a lot of search power, summoning is kind of limited to the normal, Maker, and what ghouls you can force flip up turn 1, so they'll swap control back to you. So extra ways to get your names from your hand onto the board or recover names from your grave is good, while the Earth restriction is only really locking you out of extra deck plays that you wouldn't really be able to summon enough to facilitate anyway. The deck does feel a little one note in that regard though, not really capable of doing much outside the interruptions designed specifically for it, and therefore pretty underpowered. But with a strong second wave of support. You guys aren't really gonna fall for this shit again, are you? Silhouhat Rabbit is a generic link to Illusion, ooh, that sets any continuous trap with an effect to summon itself from deck on summon, but can't be used as link material for the rest of the turn if you do. And if a card is summoned from your back row to a zone it points to, it can pop an opponent's back row. That's 10 places an access counter on itself every time a card or effect is activated, and when it hits 10, bounces to hand to set a continuous trap that summons itself directly from deck that you can activate this turn. Silhouhat Trick summons itself as an illusion, ooh, and on summon can negate cards your opponent controls up to the number of illusions you control. Nothing all that important to say about That's 10 other than I feel like some people mildly misunderstand it. Its obvious purpose is to set your finish from deck at exactly the point when it would be live, so at first glance it just seems like 3 more copies, but the important thing to remember is that placing an access counter is an activated effect, meaning that if you have That's 10 and a separate Your Finished set on board, it functionally halves the number of effects that need to be activated to make Your Finish live. If your opponent uses 5 effects, That's 10 will activate 5 times, and suddenly 10 cards or effects have been activated this turn. Moving along to Rabbit, this silly chucklefuck is a fascinating new generic extra deck tool that gives any deck that can summon 2 monsters access to a criminally unexplored pool of disruptions to try out. The most generic, of course, is Azuroon, a summon negate that's also Exploder Dragon. I rag on summon negates a lot, but as I've said before, if it's a cheap extra piece on top of a good board instead of the sole disruption you're banking your entire turn 1 on, a summon negate can be a useful protective element against complex threats. Another good option is Trick, which will pretty much always be at least 2 negates, but is himself another type of disruption I frequently rag on. Having to summon him and then activate his negation effect on a new chain after that makes timing him correctly a tricky process. You'll usually have to activate him in response to an effect that will summon a monster like Original, or on the summon of a card with an ignition effect like Princess. This also makes it harder to use against spells and traps, since they tend to come and go all within one chain. This is a decent time to bring up Rabbit's second effect to pop a back row. Since he can't be used as link material after using his effect, you'll often be leaving him on board to at best be IP fodder, so the added benefit of getting to MST whenever you fire a search target is nice. Being able to trigger him and Trick on the same chain, ordering the chain links to force whichever one is more important through is a nice benefit. For a version of Trick with easier timing to manage, there's Apophis the Swamp Deity, who can negate cards as part of the same effect that summons him, making him like a non-targeting, non-monster locked imperm. The drawback is that to even have one negate, you have to have another continuous trap up. So this is mostly an option for decks that can access continuous traps in engine, like Memento, Yubel, and Centurion. Centurion, by the way, has a lot of cool shit it can do with Rabbit, like using the summons of Centurions to trigger Rabbit or Statue of Anguish push pattern. Maybe we can bring back the glory days of Cyber Eldritch when you played your Cyber starters for a draw and then made Broken Link 2s now that there's a Broken Link 2 that literally searches Golden Lands. Or we could go back to never thinking about Eldritch again. Either is fine with me. The other thing you can do to this card is FTK. Dimension Reflector extracts a heavy toll to summon itself, but then copies an opponent's monster, and immediately dings your opponent for that value. Kinda don't like the concept of a Bish Balkan FTK where the mechanism by which you do burn damage is accessible via any two monsters. This rabbit hole is deep, I could go further I promise, but for now suffice to say this card is a solid option going forward that will at the very least make you take an extra second to evaluate any new trap monsters in the future. And also King Scarlet is here.
I'm searchable now. Is that what you wanted? I'm searchable now. Here, yeah. Is that good?
Thank you, King Scarlet. Dominus Purge. I just want you to know, Dominus just auto-corrected to Dominoes, and it made me laugh so hard I lost my train of thought writing this. Domino's Pizza is a trap card you can activate from your hand if your opponent controls a card that can negate any effect that adds a card from your opponent's deck to their hand. Then if you have a trap engraved, can destroy that card, but if you use it from the hand, you can't activate dark, fire, or water monster effects for the rest of the duel. Curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice. A new generic hand trap, but one with some of the most demanding terms and conditions I've ever seen. Not only does it lay out in no uncertain terms what crowds it refuses to roll with, it also cuts you off of extremely common generic cards like SP and Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom. How demanding can you be to think you can force me to cut the single most competitively successful card of all time? Sounds like my ex-wife. Not to mention its effect is just worse Ash Blossom. It has 1/3 of the uses Ash Blossom has. Whether the search negate is the most important one is a matter of debate and opinion, but the point is indisputable that it simply does less. The upside of being able to destroy the card if you, I don't know, used Imperm this turn is conditional enough that I almost consider it negligible. And yet, this card is still seeing some play, often in side decks of things like Madolche and Ritual Beasts, often without even cutting Ash Blossom, and I have a bit of a hypothesis on why.
What's that?
One of the common recurring complaints against Max C is that going second if your opponent sets up turn 1 and then has Max C on top of that, that's just the icing on the cake to make winning out from there impossible. It's my belief that Dominus Purge, a card which can negate Max C, but only if your opponent controls a card, was printed with the intent to address this complaint. For all our sakes, I hope no one in my almost entirely Western audience ever has to worry about this use case, except in like Master Duel, but I haven't played Master Duel in over a year, so I don't give a shit. Mulcharmy Purulia is a level 4 water aqua that you can quick effect discard if you control no cards to draw a card each time your opponent normal or special summons from the hand. But during the end phase, you have to shuffle back random cards from your hand until your hand size is equal to the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6. Also, you can only activate one more Mulcharmy monster effect this turn. The intent here is clear, to try and retread old ground but with more refined, modernized sensibilities, to both replicate the success and produce a new and improved vision of the power of the elements vid Max C. Essentially only being usable on the very first turn of the game addresses the same problem Dominus Purge does by taking away the ability to activate it after building a board going first. You can still activate it if you go first, but only preemptively at the very start of your turn to hedge against Nibiru's and Bystials. Furthermore, there's very few matchups where this card can draw as many or more cards than Max C. The only one where there's a massive positive difference is Fluanderies, a deck that triggers Max C the fewest number of times possible, and Purulia one of the highest number of times. That's another aspect of the new balance features of Purulia, that hitting normal summons makes matchups that never special summon less unfairly favored into a format where every other deck is so scared of Max C. Hitting the normal also makes it harder to justify not shotgunning it at the start of the turn. Part of the bug's appeal is being able to hold it to use in response to an effective special summon, so you can always guarantee one draw off of it. Since your opponent will frequently lead their turn with the normal, you're incentivized to fire Purulia as quickly as possible so you can get the most value off of it, meaning your opponent will have the most time possible to decide how to account for it. Passing and giving you no draws is a valid option, but so too is just kind of playing into it, because as I brought up before getting distracted from it earlier, the number of draws in question is far fewer for the majority of relevant decks. Cards that summon from hand exist, but mostly in the form of extenders or as steps in a combo. Cards that read Rhoda as E-Telly, if that makes sense. They're not necessarily the most common or least common type of summon, but they're some of the least valuable since the summon itself isn't a plus in card economy, only in tempo. I'm getting overly philosophical. Let's move on before I start talking like Confucius. And I can do that. I've read the Analects. Zhegang would say some shit like Purulia is just Max C. Just in case I didn't make myself clear earlier, cards that summon from hand exist. Almost all decks have them, and even the ones that don't will almost definitely want a normal summon. Looking at Snake Eye, they'll almost always want a normal summon Poplar and Diabellstar, maybe Kieran and Garunix in the Fire King variant, or Fenrir and Unicorn in the Kashtira variant. If they draw the one of Oak or Flambirds, they might need to summon them from hand too. This is just one example, and it probably sounds better when we're not comparing it to the sheer volume of draws Max C would net you against a full Snake Eye combo. I guess the secret to appreciating Purulia is not comparing it to his forebears. Living in the moment. Being happy with what you have rather than worrying about what you could have had. But you can't do that, can you? What you could have had. Helps the Purulia. Hello? Helps the Purulia is functionally twice per turn. Because its restriction locks you to one more effect of its archetype for the turn, and he's the only member so far, right now all this means is you can use 2 in a single turn. Drawing a second copy of it off of its effect means that you now get twice as many draws for the rest of the turn, and drawing the third copy means you get to start your own turn by activating it. Also, although the end phase condition is a little confusing, it's extremely forgiving. Even if your opponent passes on an empty board, you don't have to shuffle anything back unless they somehow gave you 3 draws before clearing their board. Kinda difficult to visualize a deck that gives you enough draws yet ends on few enough cards on field that this effect will apply. This card has very slowly gotten a foothold in the OCG, often reserved for the side deck since it really does have such little value going first. Sometimes he'll be in the main at 1 so you can cross it out, but with how few things he does better than Max C, it'll likely take some sort of cosmic shift in their format to get people to give the little guy a shot.
Diabellstar lore update.
Astellar of the White Forest can send a spell or trap from hand or field to summon any light spellcaster tuner from deck, and if a spell trap is sent to the graveyard as cost for a monster effect while it's engraved, it can reborn itself. LZ of the White Forest can send a spell trap to summon itself and search a White Forest monster, and if you summon a light spellcaster tuner during your opponent's turn, it can add itself from grave to hand. Sylvie of the White Forest is a level 4 tuner that can search a White Forest spell trap on summon, and can quick effect return a White Forest synchro from field or grave to the extra to reborn itself. Rucia of the White Forest can summon itself from hand if you control a White Forest monster, can pitch a spell trap to draw a card, and also puts a synchro back to reborn itself. All the back row reset themselves if they're sent to the graveyard to activate a monster effect. Tails of the White Forest searches a White Forest monster if you control a spellcaster or illusion. Beware pops a card your opponent controls if you control a level 6 or higher illusion or spellcaster. Woes summons a White Forest from hand or deck, then can synchro summon a White Forest. Bounces a spellcaster or illusion you control to summon one engrave or banished. Arciella, Sinister Soul of the White Forest, is a level 6 tuner synchro that can send a spell trap on summon to search a White Forest card or any light spellcaster, and gives your illusion and spellcaster synchros plus 500 and card effect protection. Silvera is a tuner synchro that books all your opponent's monsters on summon, and gives your illusion and spellcaster synchros plus 500 and double piercing battle damage. Finally, Diabell, Queen of the White Forest, is an illusion that can add any spell or trap from graveyard to hand on summon if it was made with a tuner synchro, and when your opponent activates a card or effect, can send a spell trap to summon any level 7 or lower tuner synchro from anywhere. This is a really promising first wave with a lot of consistency, pretty much no restrictions, and some great in-archetype payoffs. Starting with just a Stellar and any spell trap, you can cycle through all their main deck names and end on Diabell, Woes, and a 10 like Chaos Angel or Chengying. Oh jeez. I feel so free. There's actually a choice here. It's been so long. Like I can say whatever 10 I want is good and you'll just have to take my word for it. You can make fucking Black-Winged Assault Dragon. God, what a rush. Anyway, Woes and Diabell both have the ability to toss out a Silvera from extra who can book your opponent's whole board. With Woes, you'll have to have one of the 2s or one of the 4s on board to do it, but since both the tuners can come back as a quick effect and a Stellar can come back when you use Diabell, it's not hard to get one back on board to sync with your Woe summon. Diabell being able to summon any tuner synchro gives her a wide variety of options, but most of them are held back by the summon not being treated as a synchro summon. If you summon Formula, you won't get the draw, not that you would have anyway because it misses timing, but you can fire him to make Diabell into Chaos Angel for a banish. Something like Quandax can make her into Crimson Dragon so you can tag into a Dissipator. I guess like Shooting Dreiser can make a Stellar into something like Shen. The large majority of the examples I could list are just more quick synchro summons of random level combinations. Arciella can search Effect Veiler. Yeah, you know. That Effect Veiler. She also searches Exosisters, Dogmaticas, a couple Altergeists, some Perform Mages, and Toy Magician, who does not matter and you should not play it, but it's a good way to transition into the Toy engine. See, I told you we'd circle back to this. Toy Box setting 2 toys from deck gives you 3 sends for the cost of your monster effects off of just 1 card, but if they were just free fodder, that wouldn't be anything, no. These free sends proceed to summon themselves for free. And you might remember, Toy Soldier can search any level 4 light monster, which means you'll also get to search a White Forest tuner for free. And Tank can trade himself out to bring back your RCL engrave, getting you a bigger body to synchro with than his own. Another card that checks every single box on a Stellar, RCL, and Toy Soldier is Centurion Primera. So off of any of them, you can pivot into the Centurion engine without having to commit 12 stars to Auxilla, which you totally still can do. The Centurions not only give you more potential synchro options and possible Calamity access, they also give you even more back row that can be sent as White Forest costs. Or you could try the Horus engine, which gives you access to Wall and Sark as potential sends, and to Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, which could only synergize better if the Crystal Beast you search could somehow end up in the back row. In a similar vein, the deck synergizes well with the U-Bell package, since you can set up Phantom and then let the now useless Nightmare Throne on board be used as a Stellar cost. While we're on the topic of field spells, Chicken Game is at 1. That's a free draw that implores you to sack it before passing turn. Sending it for Rusia gets you another draw, and then making Rusia and LZ into Charge Warrior or Tri-Edge Master will get you a third draw. Draw 3. Why does that sound from... Oh yeah, Runic! Runic 2 has synergies with this deck, since you can send Runic spells you won't need this turn to load up the grave for Fountain, or you can send a used Fountain to then replace with a copy prepped with Hugin or Jerry. What's more, Hugin pitching your White Forest back row triggers their effect to reset, making her effect even more free to use. And their levels line up nicely to make your level 6 and 8 synchros, with your Runic spells even being able to summon them in response to effects like Woes, to quickly get the right materials on board for a quick synchro. And being reminded that this build is going to be summoning some fusion monsters is a great excuse to remind you that you're not locked to synchros or anything. Go ahead, make SP. Make Rabbit. Send the Trap Monster for cost. There's no rules. Make your 2 tuners into Baguska.
I don't give a damn.
You could make your 2 tuners into Amritra to search Reframing. That'd be a crazy lore crossover. I don't know why I'm on such a transition sentence kick today. Astellar can summon both Cartesia and Quem from deck, so she started seeing play as an option in Branded. As a light, Cart can make the 2 of them into Grongagnol immediately, and she's a valid material for Albion or Albion. I forgot these 2 were both named Albion. Smoke Bomb, you can play this in Snake Eye. Just like how Snake Eye appreciates Fiend Smith and Millennium, leaving some random face-up spells lying around, White Forest likes that very same thing about Snake Eye. The level 1 Snake Eyes give you a fine degree of control on the level of synchro you want, so you can experiment with 5s and 7s. And the level 8 Flamberge is a great Crimson Dragon material. Another build I've seen was capitalizing on the level 2, synergizing with Sprite.
Sprite is a series of level, rank, and link to Thunder monsters.
I think there was more, but I can't remember what I was going to say. Anyway, this deck isn't quite there because there's not true 1-card combos, and the closest things they got are a bit weak with maybe 2 to 3 interruptions and a sticky board with some decent follow-up. Not like won't see play weak, but just less powerful than some of the other things going on in the format. Also, needing a sufficient amount of spells and traps to send means you'll usually want to play more board breakers than hand traps, which isn't always going to be an ideal style of play for the format. It might do better in a format without Max C, but it still does get hit pretty harshly by Purulia. With a solid vision of how to build the deck, and maybe some decent support, I could easily see this deck being a major contender in the near future. But how long that will take, I don't know. Staring at me, will you? I mean, it's piss off.
Get out of my fucking head!
Obsession is a 9-letter word defined by Merriam-Webster as a persistent, disturbing preoccupation with an often unreasonable idea or feeling, or broadly, compelling motivation. It also defines it as something that causes an obsession, which, I mean, I learned in school not to define a word with the word, but I mean, I'm not Merriam-Webster, so... Anyway, I have been persistently and disturbingly preoccupied with Power of the Elements, Everything You Need to Know. No matter how hard I try, I can't come to grips with the fact that after 2 years, I've still yet to make a video that surpasses it. I don't even understand this video or why people liked it so much. I try to go back and rewatch it, and all I can do is cringe at how poorly researched and amateurish it is. I didn't even play with 90% of the cards I talked about in the video. I just put on a fancy hat and told myself I knew better than the rest of y'all. Most impressive part of that video to me is that I recorded and edited the entire thing while under the influence of COVID-19, and yet seemingly this is what the people wanted to see. I don't know if I could make something like it again. I don't know if I could convince myself to. But what's done is done. All I can do now is make peace with it and try to keep making things that I can be proud of. I can't go back and fix the past. Can I?